Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Turning Towards Life. This is Lizzie and Justin on Sunday morning, just after 9 a.m. As usual, a few little technical kerfuffles, but we're here, and I am extremely excited about the source that Justin has brought. We were just briefly saying how Rumi seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, and no matter how much you read Rumi, there's always another Rumi poem, and even if you've read it before, reading it again, it's different. It's like that's the nature of Rumi. So I'm very excited to be here and to come home again, as what happens seems to me just in every week. It's like a homecoming when we delve into these conversations together. So I'm delighted to be here and to live into this live inquiry of what this poem means to us. So thank you for choosing this.
You're so welcome. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome, as always, to Turning Towards Life. I'm so glad that we get to do this, Lizzie, and that so many people are with us, and people keep on coming, which is really fantastic. It's I notice that it's a joy for me to know that our conversation makes things possible for other people.
Yeah.
So that's the way in which I'm most glad, and I'm also glad because I am glad to be with people. And so I want to say, as I always say, welcome to all of you those of you who've been with us for 130 something weeks. And for those of you who just found out about us in the last 5 minutes and decided to come in and join us live, or maybe you're listening to the podcast, we're so glad to have you with us. And as usual, what we're going to do is to start with the source and see where it takes us. So this poem by Rumi that I chose this week, I'm just reaching for it here. It's actually from a book called The Purity of Desire, which is one of these wonderful books of poetry put together by Daniel Landinsky, who takes Rumi and translates him, but also interprets him along the way. So you get a mix of Daniel Landinsky and Rumi in every one of these poems. And it's called No Conflict with Anything I Do. God's face gradually fades from the infant's sight. If this did not happen, you would never be able to recognize and converse with the things you do. A soul's blindness most always increases as the body grows and certain hungers set in, and one's attention is turned that way. Now that you have traveled so far and have seen so much, what is it you most prize? What pack horse does not feel relieved when its burden is lifted? Desires narrowed down can do the same, decrease the weight you carry, and unveil the wonder in the present. Just a single movement, a single impetus I now have. This, there is no conflict with anything I do. What kind of man would ask his breath the reason for its actions? Less demanding, questioning, I now am of all I see. God's face will gradually return to your perception. My words will help draw back the curtain from your eyes.
God's face gradually fades from the infant's sight. If this did not happen, you would never be able to recognize and converse with the things you do. A soul's blindness most always increases as the body grows, and certain hungers set in, and one's attention is turned that way. Now that you have traveled so far and have seen so much, what is it you most prize? What pack horse does not feel relieved when its burden is lifted? Desires narrowed down can do the same. Decrease the weight you carry and unveil the wonder in the present. Just a single movement, a single impetus I now have. This, there is no conflict with anything I do. What kind of man would ask his breath the reason for its actions? Less demanding, questioning, I now am of all I see. God's face will gradually return to your perception. My words will help draw back the curtain from your eyes.
Thank you, Lizzie. There's so much in this. I'm sort of wondering about places to start. So I want to say a little bit about how this poem came to me. But before I say that, this arc that Rumi describes of, you'll know this because you've got such a tiny one in your life, Lizzie, of the wonder with which we come into the world, the complete non-separateness from everything that we are when we're very tiny, and how we then sort of accrue desires and all kinds of projects and all kinds of habits that take us very far away from that. And Rumi's point that that's an absolutely necessary something, because if we lived all the time in the sort of complete gaga bliss of the oneness of everything, it would be impossible to live. And then there's this point where maybe we might start to feel relieved by putting down the burden of what's necessary, what's unnecessary, and that's also part of the arc of being a human. So I love that in the poem, because it seems to me it's a real honoring of something that any of us might make the mistake of thinking there's a sort of an enlightened way to be that Rumi is talking about, and what we're meant to be doing is to sort of be giving up all of the material attachments to the world, and that we would be a particular way. And Rumi says, you have to be a person first. You have to be a person with needs and wants and desires and all of that. So I love all of that about the poem. But what's been most fascinating about it for me is, and this is a little bit of a tricky thing to try and give language to, that line that really, I often notice when you're reading, Lizzie, what of it impacts me, where do I feel the most connection to it? And it was when you read, what is it you most prize? So one of the things I've come to know about myself is that my version of God's face gradually fading from the infant sight, in other words, all of the personality structures that we take on, I think that's really what Rumi is talking about, is the particular ways that we get in. My way from being quite young was to pretend that I didn't have things that I most prized, to pretend that I didn't have things that I needed particularly. And so this poem has a very particular impact for me, because it looks like it's about, we get born, we need all kinds of stuff, we get all of these hungers, our attention gets turned that way, and eventually, if we're lucky, we start to put them down and simplify. But in my own case, the need that I most had was very often the need to look like I was somebody who didn't have any needs. And this is a real paradox, is to see that, for me, is to see that even being somebody who apparently didn't have any needs is a way of meeting a certain hunger. And that, for me, the step of learning in adulthood, that there are things that I really do have desire, that I really do desire in all kinds of ways, and being much, much more open about it, is the way of finding out how little I really need in the end. This is really tricky to say, because it's one of these twisty back and front, but I wanted to say it partly because, of course, what we're doing is just talking to one another, but also because I reckon that lots of us have this. Yeah. We don't recognize in ourselves the person who is filled with hungers and gets our attention turned that way. We think of ourselves as the person without hungers, which itself is a kind of hunger. It's the hunger to look like somebody who doesn't need anything from anyone else. It's been so liberating to find out, first of all, that I really do have needs and hungers and desires, and I can name them, and it's really okay. And then, as that being the path to so here's where I end. That line of Rumi's, which is, what is it you most prize? Desires narrowed down can do the same. Not a life without desires, not a life without wanting and hungering and longing, but just finding what it is you really want, that your heart really longs for, and then there is no conflict with anything we do. That move.
I feel such joy, Justin, listening to you and letting myself be twisted and turned around by what you're saying. And I really identify with it myself too. And what I notice for me is when you say this thing, that not needing anything, not wanting anything is also a need. What I notice for me is that the need that is there is a need to connect with people. Because if I did need something, it might diminish my connection with them. So to have needs is a risk, because I might not get what I need, therefore the connection would be broken. I might demand too much, and then the connection would be broken. So I feel like the reason that I've had the need to have no needs is all to do with like not being too much trouble, so that I won't be cast out or thought of in a certain way that makes me feel less connected. And so it's just really interesting to hear you say that, and to switch this around from not only the realm of wanting stuff or wanting certain things to happen in your life, but to see that the opposite of that is also a need. Like, I really, really appreciate that. And it makes it kind of inclusive as well of those of us. And actually, I wonder, it seems really normal to me to not need to rock the boat, but I think that's just because I'm me. I think I really enjoy, like maybe most people, I really enjoy everything being okay. Like everybody being all right with each other. And I grew up in a house where there was a lot of difficulty, and therefore to add to the difficulty would have just tipped the whole system over. So in a way, I had to just learn that there was a lot more significant stuff going on than what I needed. That really wasn't, nobody was turning to me and saying, what do you need? What are your needs? Which I'm sure not many people have in their lives when they're little. But I recognize the dynamic of, well, there's enough going on here already in the world, in my home, in the kerfuffle of life, that actually me having a load of desires and needs and wants is just too much for the system. So I need to just not do that, and then everything will be all right. And I so appreciate this, as you called it, an arc. It's so beautiful, because the path is filled with so much, but I feel like this is a really central piece of it, which is tied up with like vibrancy and aliveness, which is to be a full person in the world, which of course is to have needs and desires and wants and wishes, and to live a world-filled life that's not kind of away and detached, but that's risking it all and being in the thick of it. And I also notice that I feel a lot of risk when I say what I need. And actually this time in my life is really interesting, because when I now have this little one dependent on me, I have to make many more requests of people to help me, to give me a bit of leeway with things, and to allow certain things that I would just normally not need help with. And so I notice all my patterns come up of like, well, if I ask for this, people will think I'm a pain. If I ask for this, I'll be a hassle. If I ask for this, it will be too disruptive. So I can notice, actually, and I'm just realizing this in this moment, the gift of having Vesper, my little one. It's really showing me again, like back to ground zero about that stuff, because I can see all of my responses internally to even asking you, Justin, for certain things to do with our work together. I know I've said on, on WhatsApp, I'm really sorry to be a pain, but, I know that dynamic is there. And it's a really vulnerable place. And I almost have to kind of mitigate for it in making the request. And I'm watching myself do that and realizing that there's a lot there to be worked on and to be kind of allowing of, like, it's normal, it's okay for a person to make a request and for it to be met by generosity. And I think the other side of that too is that I think historically I have been a person where those requests have come at me, and because of my own relationship to requests, I haven't been as generous with other people's requests because I've been impatient or whatever. But it's all the same thing, which is another thing that's really hard to say. It's like in both directions it's the same dynamic. And it's really helpful for me to be on the humbling, vulnerable end so that I can kind of re-humble my responses to the world and their requests of me when they need something, and that I'm called to finding a greater spaciousness around other people's needs and other people's desires because I've got more of them myself.
Yeah, it's really beautifully said. So this is such twisty, turny territory.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the way that you're talking about it, Lizzie, and hearing and feeling your own wrangles with it, particularly your wrangles about being known as somebody with needs, and how your relationship with that changes your relationships with other people's needs is really moving. Because I know when you make a request to me, I just want to say yes, because of who you are for me and because of how I care for you. So it feels very straightforward for me that you would make a request and I would say, what can I, of course, how can I help? And so seeing that, and that's what I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because I think it would be possible to read Rumi's amazing poem as if the obvious thing for everybody was, we go, I need more, I need more, I need more, and we get, I don't know, super materialistic or something, and then somewhere along the line we feel burdened by all of that and we wake up to what we really want, and then everything is simpler. I mean, in a way, that's the simple way of talking about the arc. But what we're talking about here is that what I got onto whilst you were speaking about it is that in this first part of our lives, if we're lucky enough to get to the point where maybe we start to feel into what's really central, we might start to see that a lot of what we've been doing up until that point is dressing up genuine needs that we have in counterfeit covering up forms. So for example, for me, to look like somebody with no need is dressing up a very, very deep longing to be loved and to be intimate with other people. And that if I pretend to be somebody with no needs, if I look that way, then I will have the need that's the real deep need met.
Yeah.
But I can't say what the really deep need is. It has to be sort of covered in this great big cloud of, for some people it's being successful and being famous and being known, or being in control, or being, organized, or whatever it is. But for others of us, it looks paradoxical because it looks like we're going no need, no need, no need. But it's really a mask for something else. And like you, for me, getting onto the central longing to be able to say, I don't need to pretend to be somebody with no needs, to start to learn how to do that. Instead, maybe I could be more honest and truthful, which is always feels very, very vulnerable thing to do, and to say, I love being with you. I want time with you. Will you spend time with me? That move.
Mm.
Or the other one for me is, I'm longing for that same intimacy with the world. I'd like to be with no people for a while, thank you. And just sit in the garden or go for a walk with nobody else around, and I can feel my own. Those two things seem very, very simple for me. Those two very deep needs, the longing for being in close with people who I love and to feel loved by them, and longing to be alone but in close with the life of the world. And that's when I say those, I can feel what Rumi says in the second. part, when desires narrowed down can decrease the weight you carry and unveil the wonder in the present. When I'm really honest about those, Lizzie, I don't really need anything else. I don't need fancy schmancy anything, and I also don't need to pretend that I don't have any needs, and I don't need to do my version of your. I was thinking about your part. My version is to say yes to other people's requests, even when I don't mean it.
Yeah.
That's my twisted version. If I say yes, even though you're trying to organise a meeting with me at 6 a.m. after I've spent 7 days working really, really hard, I'll say yes, because if I don't say yes, then maybe I won't get the love and intimacy and connection that I need. And it's so much more that there's so much weight and complication in that, and it's so much more alive to be able to say, I really do long for your love and intimacy and connection, and I won't meet with you at 6 a.m. because that will, I'll be half dead if I do that.
Yeah.
So that line near the end where Rumi says, when we can, and those moments where we can contact with that, there's no conflict with anything we do. We find ourselves not torn between different parts of ourselves, like the real longing and the sort of the fake longing, or the image that I'm trying to present. And it's such, I'm not for a moment going to say I live there all the time or anything, but I do know much, much, much more how to find the place to really saying what I need. And then, even if I don't get what I need, that's not even really the point. It's so much more straightforward.
My God, there's like so many things arising for me to say. I don't know how to pick what to say. But I think the last image that popped in my mind. So the other day, we were all in my mum and dad's back garden, which is our little pilgrimage, just to go and they've got a bigger garden, and we go and sit in the garden and wave at them through the window of their conservatory. And we were all there the other day, and my sister took a picture of me lying face down in one of the children's teepees, having a sleep. And it was one of those rare moments that those gatherings, especially now, are like really meaningful to me and our little family, to see human beings and to just be in a space with other people that's big and spacious, that's allowed, and all of that kind of thing. And I think Matthew had Vesper, and I just snuck off and met a need, which was just to lie on my face on the floor. And my sister just snapped a picture of me, with my legs poking out of the tent. And it was a really significant photo for me, because I thought, my goodness, in that moment, even though I could have been having a conversation, which is the thing that the moments, the tricky thing is, human, actual face-to-face is really rare and something I really need. There was a deeper need, which was to have a rest, and I stuck myself in the tent. And I think it's significant for me because it's this thing about the paring down that is now available to me, which is not just keep on pushing and pushing because I really need connection, but as in pushing through the tiredness, but just kind of creeping away and just quietly meeting my own need by having a rest. And it feels like I'm allowing that to begin to restore me, rather than thinking that I need this connection all the time. And I'm really enjoying this question of narrowing down, because it feels like it brings the possibility as well of getting really clear about having desires, then being fulfilled, and then realizing that that was definitely a want and not a need. So like what I mean by that is having sought for many on many occasions for things that I thought I wanted, and then arriving at the place of having what I wanted and going, oh, that really didn't give me what I wanted, which because what I really wanted was probably God's face, and I was looking in the wrong place for God's face. And so in the quest to kind of return home, all of these desires get whacked into our lives as a grasping for something really meaningful, and a filling up, maybe a counter to the emptiness we feel, something like that. And what we really seek is, of course, not in, I don't know, looking at my mobile phone, a new mobile phone or a holiday or something, but God's face. And it's like, I think the arc, for me anyway, is turned, and I'm able to let go of much more through enough evidence that what I think is going to get me what I want doesn't get me what I want. And so to turn towards something deeper, to turn towards the inquiry of what is God's face. And Vesper currently shows me what is available in the infant sight. She shows me that her contact with something, which is probably what I'm seeking, is really showing me so much, and really making it very stark that the things I think I want aren't going to get me that. It's a much more mysterious thing than filling a hole. And so when the last line for me was something that really stuck out, Justin said, "My words will help draw back the curtain from your eyes." So in the reading of this, in the talking about this, I can feel that it's in service of showing us what we really might be seeking for, and letting us pare those desires down, because those desires, they do weigh heavy, because there's a lot to acquire if that's where we put our attention, and there's a lot to do in order to get there. But then in the realizing that there's nowhere to get to, those desires become kind of weird, because the for the sake of what has changed, or has become illuminated. So I'm seeking for the sake of feeling, being bathed in the light of God's face, if I'm going to use the language of this poem. And once that begins to make sense to me, all the ways that I was filling my life up with stuff suddenly seem, in the moment of reading this anyway, like, oh my God, that seems really bonkers. Because when the reason for which I'm doing something changes so radically, it kind of dismantles everything quite quickly. And that can be like a conceptual thing, but I think that this is also asking us to constantly be in the inquiry, and to wonder about what we are seeking, what we're desiring, and what the underbelly is, like you're saying, like what's the real need.
I really love the word desire here. As I was thinking about wants and needs as you were talking about them, and I was thinking, well, of course let's be really clear, there are things that we humans need. And but then there's what we think we need because we got confused, because it was covering up what we really, and this is where I want to use the desire, our really deep desire. Because I think to be a human is to long. And I love the way that you're talking about it, Lizzie, that you're pointing out that what we can do is we can really easily mistake what we really long for something else. And then I'm sure many of us know this, we go all out to get something, and we get it, and we find out it doesn't meet the longing. I get a new phone, and unless the part of my pure longing was for a new phone, which I suppose it could be, but unless it was, I think mostly with those kind of things, we find we're mistaken. It was a proxy for intimacy, or it was a proxy for delight, or it was deeper than that. It was our longing to feel home again, and to feel home in the world. And I've been smiling as you've been talking, because when our oldest son Noam was just about the same age that Vesper is now, very, very little, we took a holiday to Italy with some very, very dear friends from Italy, and we arrived in the rain in Siena very late at night. And I had this deep, deep, deep desire to go to we were staying in some hotel far out of town, and I felt like I really, really need to be in the centre of Siena, which I love from when I was younger, which was so beautiful. We all bundled in the car and drove half an hour through the rain in the middle of the night. to Sienna so that I would get my need met. And we bundled out of the car with screaming babies in the rain, and nothing was open, and it was horrible. And I could feel how my very, very real longing, which was the longing for home, for feeling here, that I had felt when I had been in the same place at the same time, for feeling filled with life, had turned into a sort of a proxy need for, we have to get in the car, everybody. I got everyone in the car in the middle of the night with our screaming babes. You know, I felt so ashamed of it afterwards. But when I look at it now, what I can see is it was a great example of what I was really longing for was actually right there. We were with our friends, and who cares that we were staying in some crummy, you know, nothing like I had imagined place we would be staying. It was really unimportant. What was important was the feel of being together and being in one another's presence. But it was covered up for me by the pretend need.
Yeah.
And that's a whole way of reading Rumi here, is that we have to do that. We have to learn how to be ones who can get lots and lots of different kinds of needs met. Otherwise we would just spend our whole life going, you know, like nothing would ever happen. And then it really helps to find out, to see if we can uncover and uncover and uncover, what do I really desire? What does my heart really long for? And once we're true about that, all of this giant performance can start to fall away, and we can dedicate ourselves towards maybe the unique thing, the thing that you, Lizzie, desire, that means that you get to be in the world in a way that's Lizzie and not someone else. And I get to, but they're all pointing in the same direction, which is back towards what's most alive, back towards what's most real, back towards what Rumi would call God's face, finding that we are not separate from anything. That's the path back. But boy, is there a lot of I think that the reason I wanted to say all of this is to appreciate in what you said, that the biggest part of it to get us started on this is to find out when we get our wishes satisfied, they don't satisfy. And instead of then just saying, well, I better have, it wasn't the iPhone 10 I wanted, it was the 11 plus or something, that will do it. And we realize that we've been pointing ourselves in the wrong direction again and again and again. And that sort of moment where we might feel both amazed and ashamed all at the same time, that's the point at which we can start to ask the much bigger question, is for the sake of what? Really, for the sake of what am I doing anything?
Yeah. I just noticed myself being really moved by this, the deeper question of what do we really long for? And in a way, it's not obvious. So it's also quite easy not to answer that question. You know, I'm noticing that it's, to ask the question is a real challenge to the way that we're living. And to answer that question would be to let go of things. But once you'd answered it, the letting go is possible, but without answering it, the opening for letting go doesn't even happen. And what a conversation to be in our lives. Like, what do we really long for? And how much would it clear up to know that? You know, in all of our wrangles with ourselves and other people, if we could stay attuned to practice making contact with that question, I wonder how much stuff would fall away, arguments would fall away, unnecessary journeys would fall away. And just feels a very beautiful, important inquiry to spend time in and to be present. The other thing I wanted to say about what you were talking about earlier was the vulnerability of doing that. So for me to say to you what I truly long for in amongst us scheduling a meeting, it is a really vulnerable thing. And yet it's right there in the scheduling, in the practical conversation, that longing can't not be there because it's so central but so obscured, and it feels so vulnerable right now even. And if I just take a moment and wonder what I really long for in these conversations with you, Justin, and the fact that we're doing Turning Towards Life, I feel so grateful that this really does align with a lot of what I long for. And what an incredible gift to be doing something that's very attuned to the deep longing that you and I both share. And for me, I think that is to be in truthful, vulnerable conversation with other human beings, and also to reach into the world and not be just me in my small world, but to be in community and to be in real exchanges with human beings. Like, I notice as I say it, it feels like I can feel the kind of oxygen in it for there to be realness and vulnerability and togetherness. I'm so grateful that this fills the desire, it meets the desire of real longing.
It's so beautiful to hear you say that, Lizzie. And I'm so glad to meet you in that longing.
Mm.
And I'm very struck as my parting thought that what you're pointing to here, that we find out what it is that our hearts really desire, what we really long for, that is most alive for us, is of course difficult, because exactly as you say, we have to lay ourselves bare to be able to say this is what I really long for.
Yeah.
And we might fear that the people who are around us will no longer love us or want to be close with us or spend time with us if they really knew what we really in our deepest heart of hearts longed for. And of course it has also been hugely countercultural, because our culture is mostly built on us longing for a superficial longing that somebody else has sold to us. You now want this, and now you want this, and now you want this, instead of finding out what it is that we're really called to do, which might have us buy none of those things. Well, that would be the problem. So what a wonderful inquiry to be in. And like you, I really long for, and here we are practicing as best we can, be it bringing this conversation widely, having something to say in the world. And I'm so glad we're doing this. And it's time for us to end for this week 100 and something. I realised I've even lost count. And to say thank you to you, Lizzie, and to say thank you to everyone who's with us. Lizzie and I are teaching this time next week our professional coaching courses, going live online for the first time, which is a great big commitment. So we will announce during the week what that means for timing and everything for Turning Towards Life. But we will be, one way or another, a conversation between Lizzie and I will be here next week, and we'll be so glad for you to be with us. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.